The world began to disarm, believing this was the way to peace. In 1939, Europe learned the bitter lesson of what happens when only one side disarms. In the 1940s, the Soviets began to expand, swallowing countries that were too small, too isolated to protect themselves. But take a look where they stopped. The world has remained a deeply dangerous place. Yet while wars have raged outside, inside Western Europe we have enjoyed 42 years of peace. For one reason, and one reason alone. We have the unity, the strength, and the determination to defend ourselves. To weaken NATO, as Labour proposes to do, would cause the whole basis of the Western defence to collapse.
The prime duty of any government is the defence of the realm. If a government's not prepared to do this, what good is anything else it may do? Because our whole way of life would then be at risk.
The Soviet Union has the most powerful conventional army in the world. In Europe, it has 3 times as many guns, nearly 3 times as many tanks, and twice as many tactical aircraft as NATO. Can we really afford to take the risk that these weapons would never be used against us? Clearly, what's keeping the peace are not our conventional forces alone, but a very simple fact. The Russians won't dare to attack us as long as we possess an effective nuclear deterrent.
Mr. Kinnock wants to change all this. He promises he'll dismantle all our nuclear weapons if the Russians dismantle just 3% of theirs. Then he adds that he'll dismantle them anyway, even if the Russians dismantle none of theirs. Is this any way to negotiate? The Americans, the Germans, the French, all our allies, think his position is totally foolish. Even the Russians think so. We'd be defenceless. As a former Labour Defence Minister, has had to explain to Mr. Kinnock.
This country would be totally exposed to nuclear blackmail. The Russians would not need to fight a war. They would only need to threaten war. We would have no choice but to capitulate.
Though he won't admit it, perhaps Mr. Kinnock is hoping that America would defend us. But why should America get involved in a war to defend us after we'd told them to take their bases out of the country?
Since 1945, no Labour Prime Minister has been prepared to take a risk on Soviet intentions. Not a single socialist government in Western Europe has been prepared to take this risk. But Neil Kinnock is more than willing to.
If Labour are not prepared to defend us, what about the Alliance? The Alliance, as always, are fudging. They say they need to keep a nuclear deterrent, but they can't agree on how or even if they would update it. So, Labour would abandon the deterrent, and the Alliance, they'd just let it fade away.
Despite the lesson of 1939, despite what has happened since, Labour, the SDP and the Liberals are prepared to jeopardise the very defence strategy that has kept us safe for over 40 years. Luckily, they are not the government of this country.
You don't prevent wars when just one side gives away its weapons. You do prevent wars by being strong enough to bring the other side to the negotiating table. And then you use that strength to maintain a solid and lasting peace. Only the Conservative Party will pursue that policy. That is our way forward. It is the only way we can be sure we can keep the peace.